From Philip, how do you decide what questions to ask and techniques to use when a client first walks in the room? You don't. You can't possibly, if you're Ericksonian, you can't possibly decide ahead of time what questions to ask when they walk in the room. You can decide the kind of questions, because that's a matter of semantics, syntax, grammar, etc. But the actual kind of real content, it has to be based on what they share with you. You need their contribution first, and then you start asking questions around that. So you can be very open-ended to start with, so you get some content-based answers. But you don't decide before, when they first walk in. You need to engage with them first. And also likewise with techniques, the way I see it is hypnosis techniques. That's a way of learning how to work with clients rather than, this is a technique that works, we'll try this one. It's not so much a tool, like a technique is a tool. A technique is a bunch of principles that you can then use with flexibility to create another technique, new techniques. So it's almost like every time you work with a client, you're not necessarily doing the same thing over and over again using the same technique. But you are using the principles behind a technique, but using it in a different way depending on the client. Go back to what I said earlier about the leisure interest, So somebody likes to listen to music, or they like to go walking, or they like to do painting. Okay, they're different activities, right? So you would use the principle of evoking the trance from within the leisure activity, but you don't use your leisure activity, which would be like a technique. Make sure they're always going to be walking along a beach every time. Some people hate beaches, You have to utilize what they've got. So a technique isn't something that's fixed. And so it's not something you can decide before when the client first walks in. You've got to discover that for yourself when you're talking with them before you do a trance induction, okay? And as they go into hypnosis, you're still investigating and researching what works for them by watching how they respond, because they're communicating the whole time, of course. Every time you interact, there's going to be a response from them. And you're monitoring that and then adjusting what you're doing all the time. So you're kind of nudging them gently into the place they need to be in order to change. So that's how I decide what technique. I don't decide what technique to use.